I want to talk to you guys about this airstrike that the United States did in Syria in 2019, where they killed over 60 civilians, women and children. This was part of an investigation that was published by the New York Times a few months ago. The Pentagon just completed an investigation of itself and, of course, found no wrongdoing. So this was the article in question, the investigation. It was called How the U.S. Hid an Airstrike That Killed Dozens of Civilians in Syria. The military never conducted an independent investigation into a 2019 bombing on the last bastion of the Islamic State. So, they basically, they conducted an airstrike and they killed all these civilians, and then the next day the site was bulldozed to cover it up. And people in the military tried reporting it as a war crime, and they wouldn't investigate it, and all of this. And so after the New York Times published this, the Pentagon finally did something. And what happened is they released, here, you can see this is 11th of May. They released here an executive summary, an independent review of what happened. And this was conducted by Michael Garrett. Okay, so if I'm not mistaken, Michael Garrett is the four-star general. On defense.gov, our website. Yeah, so he conducted this. It was supposed to be independent. Basically what happened is Lloyd Austin, the defense secretary, gave it to him. And I guess in that aspect, it's independent some way. I don't know. But another thing that they did is a press conference. John Kirby. Let me show you what they said at the press conference about this massacring of Syrian civilians. Okay, shall we take a look? So here's the first thing I wanted to show you.
Are still putting up a very stiff resistance in towns and villages throughout the Donbass. Jen?
John, in terms of these reports, going back to the Baghouz report, how come nobody is ever punished when these reports come out? There's never any accountability.
Jen, I think, and you've been covering the Pentagon a long time, you know that.
That's a good question. I also want to know the answer to this question, because they do all these reports sometimes, but no one's punished. You kill a bunch of civilians, there'll be a report, but no one's actually punished. Why is no one ever held accountable? I'd like to know as well. What's the answer from the Pentagon?
Any accountability.
Jen, I think, and you've been covering the Pentagon a long time, you know that we take leadership and accountability very seriously here. I'm not gonna, I couldn't begin and wouldn't try to chronicle every single incident of civilian casualties over the past years and the example. What I can talk about here today is Baghouz. And the reason why the secretary wanted a four-star who wasn't connected to the operation in any way to review it was to make sure that we got it right.
Okay, this is a bunch of drivel. What he's saying, I'll translate for you. He's saying, we wanted to pretend, we wanted to give the appearance that we're investigating this thoroughly and independently. So that's why the defense secretary gave this investigation to a four-star general. Hold on. Yeah, the four-star general is not connected to this operation, but he's still a general and he's still military. What does that mean? It's the same club. It's the same institution. How is that independent? It doesn't matter if he wasn't connected to the operation. You think... do I have to explain this? Is the conflict of interest not clear enough? My goodness. Let's continue with the rest of the answer.
Connected to the operation in any way to review it was to make sure that we got it right in terms of how this operation was conducted and how it was investigated and dealt with after the fact. And he has complete trust and confidence in the work that General Garrett did. And General Garrett looked at this exhaustively over the course of many months to make sure that he could properly understand what happened. And he did not find, and he's laid it out in that exec sum that you can see for yourself. He did not find that anybody acted outside the law of war, that there was no malicious intent, that the ground force commander, given the information he had at the time, made the best decisions he could in the moment against a very aggressive ISIS force. And he also found that after the fact, there were deficiencies in the way this was investigated and processed. So I think while we don't always get everything right, we do try to improve. We do try to be as transparent as we can about what we learn, and we're standing up here taking questions about it. And not that I don't want to. Well, I'll just leave it at that.
He still didn't answer the question. The question was, why is no one ever held accountable? Why is there no accountability? He didn't answer the question. Let's take a look at what else he says. So I'm going to be honest. The guys asking him, the reporters in the room, they did press him. I'm not going to lie. I'm pleasantly surprised. He could have gone a bit further, but nevertheless, here's another question that he gets asked, and take a look at what he says here. Oh boy.
Yeah, Oren.
John, this report focuses on the Baghouz strike, but if you look back at Afghanistan, even with the Secretary's focus on civilian casualties, there appears to be a pattern emerging here of no one being held accountable. What does it take for accountability to be imposed, or for someone to be held accountable for civilian casualties? Because you seem to be saying that, look, as long as there's no malicious intent, the number is irrelevant of civilian casualties.
No, well, we've never said that, Oren. And again, I think we would take issue with that. I mean, we're standing up here talking about civilian casualties. You don't see that coming out of Ukraine. You don't see that coming out of the Russian Ministry of Defense. We're actually answering for it. And we're releasing an unclassified summary of a classified report on.
Wow. Wow. Where do I even begin with this one? So he got him. That's effectively what they're saying. The number is irrelevant. So whether they kill 1 civilian, 10 civilians, or 60 civilians, as long as there was no malicious intent, it's okay. So what they're saying here is that as long as the United States has a military objective, it's worth killing Syrian civilians. Yeah, because they're Syrians. That's what they're saying, effectively. That's really the bottom line. And again, I want to be very clear. Can you imagine the outrage if a Syrian unit was running around the United States, blowing up a bridge in Texas, blowing up some residential neighborhood in Austin? Like, do you think it's okay? Do you think Americans would be okay with that unit killing dozens of American civilians? You remember what happened on 9/11 when 3,000 civilians, Americans, were killed tragically, very tragically? The United States went to war. The United States viewed that as an act of war, because it's unacceptable to kill American civilians on American soil. I agree. So why is it okay for Americans to go to other people's countries and kill civilians there? Because they have a military objective. Fuck your military objective. You're not allowed to be there. You know, the United States has no permission to be in Syria. None. I don't care if they say we're fighting ISIS. No one fucking asks you to fight ISIS. Do you accept if Iran comes to the United States to fight the Proud Boys? Do you accept this? No. Because it's not their country. It's none of their business. And the irony here is that we all know why ISIS exists. ISIS exists because the United States and Great Britain invaded Iraq. There was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq. There was no ISIS. There was no such thing until after they invaded it and created a power vacuum and turned it into a Wild West. So they create this problem which kills civilians, and then they come in to solve the problem and kill more civilians and act like they're doing you a favor. They act like they're doing something noble. Like they should be lauded for this. And then, oh, look, we're standing up here and we're taking responsibility. No, you're not. You're putting out a piece of toilet paper. That's not going to bring anyone's lives back. What good is this? You know, let me be very, very clear. The Pentagon can say whatever it likes. The fact that the United States is in Syria illegally is a crime of aggression. So it's no different from what they say about, they constantly say Russia is violating Ukraine's sovereignty. So what is this? What is the United States killing 60 Syrian civilians in Syria then? That's not violating Syria's sovereignty. I haven't even talked about the oil fields that the US is occupying. They're stealing the oil. They just stole 70 tankers the other day of Syrian oil. I mean, come on. The list is endless here. It's endless. I don't accept this nonsense. Like, I'm very sorry, okay? But this guy over here, John Kirby, he is not fit. He is not fit to say whether it's worth killing dozens of Syrian civilians. It's not for you to decide. No one gave you this right. You're not God. You don't get to murder people for whatever reason you say and then claim that is justified. It's not even your country. It's not your country. And I want to say another thing. When the Syrian government, when the Syrian army and the Russian army, again, this is the difference. Russia is actually officially, legally inside Syria, not illegally like the Americans. Russia was invited by the Syrian government to help fight Al-Qaeda, okay? When the Syrian army and the Russian army kill civilians during combat, when they're fighting Al-Qaeda, which again, it breaks my heart and it's wrong. But when they do that, the media have no problem saying that's a war crime. They're targeting hospitals. And I mean, again, I don't know if that's true that they're actually targeting hospitals on purpose, but they have no problem saying the Russian army, the Syrian Air Force killed civilians. They just say it like that, right? And even if the Russians and the Syrians say, yeah, but we're fighting terrorists, they don't care. The media doesn't care. They say Bashar al-Assad is a brutal dictator and he's butchering his people. So let me get this straight. It's okay for the Americans to kill Syrian civilians fighting ISIS, but it's not okay when the Russians and the Syrians do it? What kind of double standard is that? It's either not okay for everybody or it's okay for everybody. You can't have it both ways. And the irony here is that, once again, even if you're okay with that, it doesn't allow the United States or anyone else from NATO to be in Syria. They don't have permission. So what do you call that when you send your army into another country without permission? It's called a fucking invasion. All right? So they don't mince words about Ukraine, but here, it's an operation. Yeah, okay. Yeah, we know your games. Very clever. You're very clever. You're very funny. And, he's saying we're better than the Russians.
The number is irrelevant of civilian casualties.
No, well, we've never said that, Oren. And again, I think we would take issue with that. I mean, we're standing up here talking about civilian casualties. You don't see that coming out of Ukraine. You don't see that coming out of the Russian Ministry of Defense. We're actually answering for it. And we're releasing an unclassified summary of a classified report on civilian casualties. Of course we take it seriously. We wouldn't, wait a second, we wouldn't have stood up a civilian harm and mitigation response action plan if we didn't want to get better at this.
Oh, who cares about your stupid committee? What is it? What did he say? Civilian reduction harm something. Here's a tip. I know how you can mitigate and reduce civilian harm. How about you don't bomb other countries? Problem solved, right? Problem solved. There's no need for a committee. Everybody can go home. Stop invading and bombing other countries. Problem solved. Saved you lots of time and money. Okay? Here's another good question.
But I don't.
Here we go.
Question and get back to you. You got me on that one. I wasn't prepared for that one. Kessin.
On Baghuz strike, John, you made several times when we talk about this strike, you compared U.S. treatment to the civilian casualty claims to the Russian treatment to these types of operations. In Mariupol, we have seen Russians striking a building where kids and civilians were, and we have been reporting about this. That could be a war crime. But in this case, we have seen that the women, children are being killed. Yes, you are coming out speaking to these issues in a transparent way, but that doesn't change the fact that the United States military have killed dozens of kids and women. Why are you making a comparison with the Russians and just trying to justify the United States?
Not trying to justify anything. Not at all. The difference is we're admitting that, yes, we killed some innocent civilians, women and children, in 2019 in Baghuz, Syria. It's all out there for you to see.
What you arrogant bastard. He's so disgusting. He's almost laughing about it. Like, yeah, we killed some civilians. And you're disgusting. You're disgusting, really. That's really shameless. Can you imagine Putin saying that? They would have a field day. I want to read you from the New York Times investigation about this strike, just so you can understand what was going on. Okay? Oh man, this is really oh boy. Civilian observers who came to the area of the strike the next day found piles of dead women and children. The human rights organization Raqqa is being slaughtered silently posted photos of the bodies, calling it a terrible massacre. Satellite images from 4 days later show the sheltered bank and area around it, which were in control of the coalition, appeared to have been bulldozed. So you understand what they did. They basically buried all the bodies and covered it up so no one would see it. And I want to be very clear. They are saying that these women and children were, basically living among ISIS, and they were with them. And they said that it wasn't clear that they were civilians because sometimes they took up arms. I want to be very clear here. I obviously dislike, I hate Daesh. They are terrorists, and they do nothing but the bidding of the West. But I still don't think it's okay to just kill civilians like that. Do you understand? So even though I'm politically completely, I really hate everything that these stand for, I still don't agree with this. And here's the, again, this is from the New York Times. So they published this investigation in November 2021. And this report from the Pentagon only came out this month. And this is, I just played to you Kirby speaking, but here's what it says in the New York Times. The Pentagon faults review of deadly airstrike, but finds no wrongdoing. Okay? So a Pentagon investigation into a U.S. airstrike in Syria in 2019 that killed dozens of people, including women and children, found that the military's initial review of the attack was mishandled at multiple levels of command and replete with reporting delays and information gaps. Can I translate what that means for you? It means that there was a cover-up. Okay? Those were not mistakes. If they actually took this seriously, this wouldn't have happened. The inquiry also determined that most of the people killed in the strike, which was carried out by a shadowy special operations unit called Task Force 9, were probably Islamic State fighters. Probably. According to 3 officials familiar with the findings, and that military officials did not violate the laws of war or deliberately conceal casualties. The findings did not call for any disciplinary action. Great. So they're basically saying, well, those civilians were probably enemy combatants, and so it's okay for them to kill us. Once again, I'm going to repeat this. The United States has no right to be in Syria. It's a crime of aggression, and the presence itself is a violation of international law. Even if the United States, let me put this very clearly for you, even if the United States sends one soldier into Syria and he doesn't kill anybody, it's illegal. Do you understand? If you still don't understand what I'm telling you, think, what do you think would happen if Syria sent one soldier, never mind hundreds, into the United States with a machine gun, full gear, everything? What do you think would happen? What do you think would happen to this guy? What do you think would happen with on a diplomatic level also against Syria? I don't need to tell you because you already know the response would be very harsh, to put it mildly. So, anyone who wants to come and start making excuses for this, go to hell, really. The military is always going to protect itself, just like the cops do that. This is like the police, investigating themselves after they kill an unarmed black man or anybody unarmed, just any civilian, right? Especially when you've seen the footage and you can see how unfair it is. Most of the time, nothing happens. With George Floyd, it's only because the whole country protested, the whole world, actually, all over the world, people were protesting and outraged by how brutal and inhumane that video was, that the cops were tried, okay? Chauvin, I think was his name. But usually, most of the time, nothing happens. And what do the police do? They'll put the culprit on administrative leave, and then the department will investigate itself and find no wrongdoing. Yeah, of course. You know why? Because they're friends with the guy who did the killing. So of course they're not going to find their friend guilty. They're friends. They're colleagues. And even if they don't like him, by doing this, they incriminate the whole department. It puts a stain on their name. Although honestly, you know, given some of the video that you see sometimes, that's big enough of a stain. And it's very, very heartbreaking. You know, I've seen videos, both black, white, you know, homeless guys, mentally ill, people suffering from you know, a mental illness, being killed so unfairly. It's absolutely heartbreaking, and nothing happens. And so this culture is perpetuated because when you have no accountability, then you get killing with impunity. And that's why the Israelis, for example, are not going to investigate the killing of Shireen, because there is no one to hold them accountable. So why should they do that? Same thing here. The US military is not going to hold anyone accountable because they don't have to. The British military, the UK, they've convicted, I think, one guy, or at least the first guy to be convicted of a war crime was Donald Payne. He was a corporal. And this was in Iraq. Baha Musa is the Iraqi man. He was taken into custody by the British Army in September 2003. So this is just a few months after the invasion. And this is Baha Musa. You see, this is hard. This breaks my heart, man. This breaks my heart. That's him. In his mid-20s. And he just works in a hotel, and the British arrested him, and they literally beat him to death. No crime, nothing. He did literally nothing. They beat him to death in custody. And the British Army convicted one man, even though it was a whole group of them. Only one soldier. His name is Donald Payne, and he was the first British soldier to ever be convicted of a war crime, which really tells you something. Like as if the British never did anything before 2003, and as if that was the only one. But anyway, my point is, do you know how long that guy went to prison? 1 year for murder. 1 year. He was released after 1 year for murdering an innocent Iraqi man in custody. So that shows you the level of disrespect, how little value they give to the lives of Iraqis, to the lives of the Syrians. Can you imagine if an Iraqi man murdered someone in London? They would get life in prison, maybe 25 years. But if you're British and you invade Iraq and you kill an Iraqi in custody and you beat him to death for no reason, 1 year in prison. Like this is why we know that the British Army does not hold people accountable for war crimes. The US Army doesn't do this either, because there's impunity, and it's very disgusting because they talk about justice and they talk about democracy. They talk about, civil liberties and having accountability and checks and balances. It's nothing. None of this is there. Nothing. No human rights. Nothing. It's all a lie. When it really comes down to it, it's all a lie. They don't hold anyone accountable. And when this unit that went through in Syria, that conducted this strike in 2019 and killed these 60 Syrian women and children, it's Task Force 9. And there are other reports about Task Force 9 going around in Syria and bombing, calling in airstrikes on civilians and civilian infrastructure, like the dam in Tabqa. And again, that dam is so crucial that if the bomb had exploded, because the bomb went into the dam but didn't detonate, if that bomb had exploded, the water that would have overflowed, it would have killed more Syrians than all the Syrians that have died in the war. Can you think can you imagine, can you grasp how catastrophic that is? And it's the same task force. So they go around saying, oh, we're under attack, oh, help, it's self-defense, and they call in an airstrike, even though they're not allowed to usually, because they have to run it up the chain of command and get approval. So they don't want to do that, and they lie, and they say, oh, it's self-defense, and then they bring in the airstrike, and they kill a bunch of civilians and get away with it, because they say, oh, well, we believed it was proportionate, we believed that it was crucial, we believed that we were under attack. They just have to say, we thought we were under threat, and that's it. I'm sorry, man. This is unacceptable. It's unacceptable, and it reminds me of the British SAS and the Australian SAS. For those of you who don't know, the SAS is the Special Air Service. It's basically the British Special Forces. So in the US, you have the Navy SEALs or Delta Force. It's the British equivalent. And and there's an SAS also in Australia. And both of these, the British and the Australian SAS, were in Afghanistan, right? Because they also invaded Afghanistan with the Americans. And there were multiple occasions where they went and they executed Afghan men and boys. So they would kill an Afghan boy. There was an Afghan boy who was sleeping in his father's arms, and they shot them dead, both of them. Just executed. And then they say, oh, he had a knife. And what they do is they take a knife and plant it on the body. And you can see in the emails from the military base, they were actually joking amongst each other that there were more dead bodies than knives, right? So they basically didn't have enough knives to plant on the dead bodies to claim that it was self-defense. Oh, he pulled a knife on me, I had to kill him. And they were joking about this in the emails, and this was published by the Sunday Times and the BBC. I mean, so disgusting. So disgusting. And what do you think happened? Do you think anyone is held accountable? No, not a single fucking person. Not a single person. And the Australian, I saw a video of them. They chased an Afghan man. He was 25, 26. His name was Dad Muhammad. And this is the helmet footage. And you can see them very clearly. They're chasing this guy with a dog. There's 3 of them, and they have a dog, and they're chasing him. And then he's on the ground, and they let the dog loose, and then they just execute him for no reason. So I've seen a lot of these reports and these videos and evidence of war crimes, and they're never prosecuted. And I'm not surprised here that the U.S. is not, they admit responsibility, but not guilt, and they don't hold anyone accountable. So this is really as far as it goes. And I find it very ironic that they want to point the finger at the Russians for committing war crimes. And, why don't you lead by example? Why don't you show the world that you actually care about accountability if you want to start talking about that? And by the way, I'm not going to lie. Like the Russians, man, already here about Ukraine on the channel, I showed you the Russians violated the Geneva Convention. They committed a war crime because they're filming prisoners of war. Right, so that's a clear violation of the Geneva Convention, and that's the most basic one. And I'm 100% sure there are more, because this is the problem with war: is that both sides never really you can't have 100% of people who are respecting the rules of war and who are actually respecting civilian life and respecting prisoners of war. The difference is that you have to have accountability, but there is none. This is the tragedy, and. This is what Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense in the United States, says about this investigation on May 17th. He says that he basically says that everything was fine. They didn't violate in the laws of war. And then he makes like these empty promises like, oh, you guys should make your reviews more thorough. And you should meet your obligations to mitigate and review civilian harm incidents. And this doesn't mean anything. It's just hogwash. It's just all talk. It's hot air. It doesn't mean anything. They're not going to change anything. And they're going to keep, as long as you let things like Task Force 9 or the, what was it again? I forgot the name of the squadron. There was this British SAS squadron I was telling you about. As long as you let these people go around murdering civilians, they're going to keep doing it because they know they can get away with it, even when there's an investigation. So this does nothing. And it doesn't address the root problem, okay? Because I'm going to be very clear. Even if the US was in Syria and didn't kill a single civilian, it still has no right to be in Syria. Do you understand? So this is a symptom of a much larger problem. And that's the military-industrial complex that they go to countries and they bomb them and occupy them. And it's imperialism. This is the root cause of the problem. And the civilian deaths are a symptom of that. A very serious one.